Chapter 23, Dolphins. The sounds of enemy fighting echoed through the dark woods. I slowly peeked around the tree. Just before tapping into Mike's thoughts to find him, I heard a familiar voice shout, "Amber, watch out!" As I turned my head to the right, two gunshots went off simultaneously. A burning sensation hit my cheek, and a female tracker fell lifeless to the ground. Suddenly, roughly 20 feet away, between two trees, was the shadow of a man. It was Zeke, holding his handgun. The bullet from the woman's gun had grazed my face as his bullet pierced her heart. He had just saved my life. Again. Zeke and I stepped closer to examine the body. She had long, wavy hair pulled back in a hair tie. A familiar earring shone from her left earlobe. It was a gold dolphin. He reached into his shirt and pulled out the necklace with the dolphin ring. The tracker wasn't just any tracker. This was Zoe. Zeke knelt beside her lifeless body. The blood was flowing all over the ground. He held her hand and squeezed it tight, hoping this was all a nightmare. Off in the distance, you could hear the chaos. I should have gone to help the others, but I didn't want to leave his side. I knelt beside Zeke while shouting for Mike in my mind. "Mike, where are you?" Excuse me. We sat in solitude, waiting for Zeke to decide what we did next. Running through my head suitable words for a time like this, but I couldn't find my voice. Nothing came out. With his broken heart and pain, my empath abilities felt crushed, like a car just fell on top of my chest. As an empath, sometimes emotional pain could hurt worse than physical. Tears formed in my eyes. "How is she a tracker? How did this happen?" he asked out loud. She had been brainwashed by Jasper, another mind control puppet, using our own kind to turn against us. I was choking on my words, still unable to speak. Only minutes went by, which felt like hours. Mike and Max sprinted over, followed by Evan and Danny. They'd survived yet another epic battle between good and evil, while I felt helpless in this combat. My assumption was they killed the rest of the trackers. I tapped into Mike's thoughts to forewarn him that the deceased woman we were kneeling beside was Zoe. The rest were astonished by what they saw. They knew exactly who it is. Through our thoughts, I updated them on the details of this horrific bloody scene. Danny's face was confusing to read. I couldn't tell if she was perturbed with how this played out or secretly happy she was gone. Evan knelt across from her body and placed his hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, Zeke." Zeke jumped up. Just don't," he bellowed as he stormed away. Instantly, I felt the mixed emotions of anger and sadness coming from his tone. It seeped through me, hitting me directly in the heart. Knowing what this intense emotion was like with the loss of a loved one, I thought he shouldn't be alone, especially since I felt once again this was my fault. I quickly jumped up to rush after, but I didn't want to leave my husband or upset him. Waiting for the okay, Mike nodded his head to go after him. I mouthed the words, "I love you." His lips returned the same words. Zeke, wait," I shouted, but he kept going. Now it was me chasing him. "I'm sorry," I apologized, while we kept a steady pace with him in front of me. He didn't acknowledge my apology while continuing to rush toward the vehicles. Once we reached the Camaro, he opened the driver's side to pop open the trunk. "Zeke," I shouted his name from the other side of the car, attempting to get his attention. Still completely ignoring me, he walked around the back of the car to lift the trunk and shuffled through it to find some shovels. "Zeke, talk to me," I repeated. He pulled a shovel out and dropped it on the ground. "What, Amber?" he shouted. "Tell me, what is there to say?" I swallowed as I continued to feel the combination of aggression and sorrow. Not only could I feel it, I saw it all over his face. I was struggling to hold back the emotions. The connection between us was more intense than I could imagine, impossible to ignore. This was more than just my empath abilities. I wasn't used to this feeling with someone other than Mike, which was causing more confusion. "I just killed the one person I love more than anything," Zeke shouted, "and she isn't coming back. And now I have to bury her in some random forest," waving his hand at the trees. He's scaring me with his deep tone. He stepped closer, increasing my nervousness. "But you want to know the worst part of it all?" he exclaimed as his eyebrows bunched together. "I knew it was her. The second I saw her point that gun at you, the earrings shined from the moonlight. I knew." My eyes were glued to the ground, and I was afraid to speak, but I pushed myself to say something. "That doesn't make sense." I said, shaking my head, trying to comprehend this mess. I thought they wanted me alive. How did you know she was going to kill me? He paused, swallowed, took a deep breath, and toned his voice down. While she pointed the gun at your head, I tapped into her thoughts. She thought you were Danny. Zoe knew how much Danny liked Zeke. From behind, I could see the resemblance between us. We were both fit and wore our hair in a ponytail, and being in the dark forest with only the moon for light didn't help. But in that split second, I had to make a choice, Zeke mumbled. I gazed at him with a heavy heart. You chose me, I whispered. My eyes watered, but I held back from crying. He slid both hands through his hair, exasperated. I had to. Amber, she was going to kill you. Zeke took a deep breath and sighed, slamming his hands at his side. I don't know what it is, but this feeling inside is telling me to protect you, almost like I have no control over my own choices, he said, pointing to his heart while raising his voice. Every day I feel it, and it gets stronger and stronger, and I know you have Mike, but what we have, it's different. You can't deny it. He glided his hand through his hair again. I may not know who my soul is yet, but what I do know is it's here to protect you and this baby. My words were lost. I wasn't sure what to say. My soul had complete control over that trigger, and I didn't stop him because an inexpressible love, the thought of losing you. He paused, staring in my eyes with tears forming in his. I was speechless. My words were strangled in my throat, still trying to process everything. I could hear his frustration. I placed my right hand on my stomach, wondering why this baby needed to be protected. The revelation of this unusual pregnancy had caused nothing but complications in every direction. A tear slid down my face. I felt like this was all my fault. Why does this stuff keep happening? How do I fix this? Zeke studied my face where the bullet had grazed my cheek. I had forgotten about the wound. Blood had dripped down onto my shirt. I stared deep into his soulful eyes. Zeke slowly reached up and wiped my tear with his thumb. Then he left his hand on my cheek. It felt warm, then cold, then back to warm. I was nervous about his next move. A big breath in, and I slowly let it out. Our eyes stayed locked in this unspeakable moment. I went behind his eyes, deep into his mind without entering it, connecting without telepathy. It was more like a feeling of clear knowing, a spontaneous manifestation that was unexplainable. The energy passing through his hand into my face was pleasantly comfortable. I froze as if time didn't exist, just like the feeling Mike shared with me. My body tingled from the inside. Anticipation rose, my heart fluttered, and I sensed a weakness at the same time as fear. I felt like the world was spinning around us and we were stuck to the ground. The suspense was too much, and any intimate move he made was a promise broken by him. Then he gently brought up his other hand. Was this really happening? I couldn't deny the enigmatic love being shared through energy, but if the baby wasn't stopping him, this must be part of my destiny, a reason for this doing. Just when I thought he was leaning in for a kiss, he hesitated. He held his hand over my cheek, keeping it steady. I suddenly felt guided into my next move, as if our future was written and I needed to allow it to take action. No fighting this moment, just accepting it. Slowly I shut my eyes. My hand reached up and laid on top of his, mesmerized by the touch, comforted from the warmth. I opened them back up. His compassionate eyes glowed. Mine followed with hot fires of flame. Orange and blue healing energy emerged from his hand. I felt this wonderful sensation, and the burning slowly went away. After a few seconds, my wound closed shut and our eyes returned to normal. That was completely unexpected. I reached up to wipe the blood. The wound was no longer there. You can heal, I said. Zeke focused on his right hand, befuddled by another discovery. He was a healer like me, but how? Zeke rubbed his forehead. He ached inside, twisted by the feelings he couldn't control. Before my empath ability set in, I knew exactly what he was going through. Uncertainty flowed through his thoughts, feeling lost and yet angry at the same time. Fear of losing true to yourself on top of losing someone he loved. He couldn't even enjoy the new gift given to him. He needed my guidance before he lost his way. I wish I had justification for the circulating hurricane of emotional wreckage. In this situation, I need to pray, praying to any God to give us a sign, a God from this world or the next. Help me, help him. He saved my life twice, now let me save his. I held his hand tightly and a tear rolled from my eye. Then suddenly the sign I'd asked for arrived. My prayers were answered. Zeke's eyes became violet, and I felt the electrical pulse in mine. He dropped to the ground, holding his ears from the agony coming from within, shouting, "Make it stop!" I knelt, placing my hand on his shoulder. While his pain grew immensely inside, his eyes shifted to a bright white. Suddenly, my ability kicked in hard, and the pain flowed in my head like an intense migraine. But I wasn't letting these feelings control me. Zeke needed me. I'd been through this before. I knew what needed to be done to help guide him through the transition and ease the throbbing sting. I leaned down to his ear and whispered the same words spoken to me while my soul was awakening. "It's going to be okay, Zeke. Don't fight it. It will only make it worse." A new memory flowed through us. It showed us his soul, and we now understood why we connect, the unfathomable love for one another, and why he could heal. The truth unraveled, and it finally all came together.